Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, here we are, already in Q2 of 2024. This is incredible. Time just flies. And I'm bringing to you another special guest today. I'm getting to talk to Kenny Braxton. Kenny is the Director of Inclusion, Diversity, and Talent Acquisition at HF Sinclair. And he's also the 2024 Dallas HR Stars Diversity Award recipient, which is where I actually connected with you recently. Hey, Kenny, glad to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Bruce. Thanks so much for having me on. It's quite an honor to be on a platform like this where so many stars, what I call HR athletes, have graced the airwaves. So thank you so much for the invite.
Man, I'm glad to have you on. I always like to reflect on when I met my guests, and I think I don't know if we've met, but I know I've known who you were, or you were announced as the diversity and inclusion winner at the HR Stars Gala. Is it gala or gala?
I say gala, but I'm from all different parts of the world. So
So anyway, you went up and you got the award, and I remember I mentioned to you it moved me because you said I'm speechless. And whenever I heard that, like I felt this chill of gratitude. It was incredible. And so anyway, you have a energizing smile, and it was just a cool moment. And I was like, man, I got to get Kenny on the show, man. This guy's energizing. Talk about the gala, the HR Stars event. What'd you think about that event?
Bruce, I'm still basking. First of all, I think a lot of folks would agree with me to do this kind of work. It's very meaningful work, but day to day, sometimes it can feel thankless, right?
Mm.
You you get your wins along the way. Sometimes you get really big wins, like the night of February 23rd, and sometimes it's the small wins where you present something on a topic around inclusion, and someone just says, thank you for letting me be my authentic self." That night, to be amongst so many people in a room full of very accomplished HR professionals, that was the next level for me. I'll forever be grateful for that evening, and I'll do everything to live up to the committee that positions me to be able to be a recipient.
Well, we're going to get into some of the things that you're doing in your work. So, did you know a lot of people there? I noticed we have a lot of the same connections. Did you know a lot of people there?
I did. I did. It was funny. I ran into people I hadn't seen in 15 and 20 years. I ran into people, Tony's like the Michael Jordan of all HR, right? So I knew exactly who he was. I've done a lot of recent work with Tony, so it was
Yeah,
good seeing him up on the podium.
yeah. Tony's fantastic, great at everything he does. He actually forwarded my first book, Find Your Lane. I was like, I got to get Tony to do that, and yeah, he's fantastic. I've had him on the show. He was in season one, and man, I we're going to get into some of the things that you're doing. I would love to do that. I would like for you to, before we start, for those who don't know HF Sinclair, would you share a brief highlight of your organization and how you serve your customers?
Absolutely, Bruce. HF Sinclair, the easiest way to describe what we do is we make the products that make life go. And what I mean by that, and sharing that with you, is we refine and market traditional and renewable fuels for planes, trains, and automobiles, plus other essential products such as asphalt and road tire, fibers for clothing, cell phones, construction materials, cosmetics, plastics for packaging and home goods, rubber for your shoes and tires. So we are quite busy. I will also add, as the director of talent acquisition, we also provide careers that allow you to step up and stand out.
Hmm. Tell me about that. Step up and stand out. I like that.
Well, I think that we're an organization that invites bold thinkers, and we invite your creativity, and you really do get an opportunity here at HF Sinclair to own the space you occupy. So it's all about stepping up and standing out. And you have a creative idea that is efficient and big. Be prepared, because you're going to own that, and you're going to be the trailblazer to bring us to the next level with that great idea you have.
doesn't it feel good to work for an organization where it just like it gives you that energy? Like for me, the Armstrong Company, whenever I'm talking about our company, we're a growth oriented company. We continue to acquire companies and we move community, right? And so as
Yeah,
you shared that, I was like, it just feels good, doesn't it?
it does. When you wake up every morning and you know you're a contributor to what helps folks' life become better, provides different kinds of services to make things in our community a better place to live.
I
So
love it.
absolutely.
I love it. Hey, I do want to get into some of this stuff you're doing, but before we do that, I would love for, well, I'm sure I'm going to learn some things, but for the listeners, tell the Kenny Braxton story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into HR and talent acquisition and leadership?
Now, like a lot of HR leaders and professionals, you don't show up at career day and say, I'm going to be a HR manager one
Mm,
day. I'm going to be a HR director in talent acquisition. As
mm,
a matter of fact, when I got involved in HR first, we didn't call it HR, we called it personnel. So that's how much
mm.
now I'm dating myself.
You're dating yourself. I
But
love it.
the way I got involved in HR, I worked at Six Flags Over Texas as a teenager in the summers through high school and college. And I worked in the retail department in the gift stores. And at some point, I was promoted to different leadership roles from shop lead to shop manager and so forth. And I would help with training for new hires. And I'll never forget one hot summer day, some of the folks from personnel, now HR, came to me and they said, hey, we had someone call in sick today that was going to do our new hire orientation. And from what we understand, you have a theater and film background, so you probably have a good memory. So here's this book. And back then for orientation, you got a 350-page book with like all the rules of the do's and don'ts and do this and this is our culture and this is our mission statement. You have to memorize all of that. And they said, you think you can memorize this or at least summarize that by, let's
Mm,
say, 3 o'clock today? So I did the best I could. I had no
mm,
reason not to believe in myself at the time. So I did. And as time went by, I would be pulled in to be like the backup facilitator. And then at some point, they would ask me to come and help with the job fairs and interview because we would bring in probably like 75 to 150 applicants a week. And the new hire number would match that amount too, because, Six Flags brought in, I want to say 10,000 plus folks a week that would
mm.
come visit. And my numbers are probably a little off now, but that's eventually. And at some point, they had a job open for learning and development. I never heard of learning and development, didn't really know what it was, but in a nutshell, they needed someone that was a facilitator to not only facilitate orientations on a regular basis, but also leadership trainings. I jumped into that role. A lot of fun. It was great for the most part. I mean, working at Six Flags, if you could work in the AC, that was a big win in its own right. So, so
No
yeah, so I
kidding.
was in I was in L&D for a couple of years. The very
Mm,
funny thing about all of this is I would see the recruiters coming in and out, and they just looked like they were on this vicious grind. I was like, out of all jobs in HR, I don't know everything they do, but those guys, I don't want to be a part of that. And here I am, a director of talent acquisition. I've been in talent acquisition space for well over 25 years now.
mm. That's fantastic. Where did you actually go to school?
Well, it's funny when people ask me that question because whenever I'm asked that question, I say, well, at what point in my life and which one? So my school story is very interesting. Right out of high school, I was accepted to Prairie View A&M University outside of Houston, HBCU, and I was there for about 2 years as a theater arts major. Loved it. Was a little homesick. Also, through college, I worked at Six Flags Over Texas because I grew up in Arlington, so I would go home on the weekends and on the holidays and stuff like that and work. And my friend base was there. But through working at Six Flags, I really developed a love for just working there and learning about business. Long story short, I transferred from Prairie View A&M and attended North Texas,
Mm,
where I joined a fraternity. And some people are really good at that school thing and fraternity thing. I wasn't good at both. So I was in and out for a very long time. Went to community college in between, but I claimed North Texas because that's where I really
mm,
grew up as an adult and developed. It was also just such a great school at such great time in my life. But long way to answer the question. I obtained my business administration degree at Northwood University online. Once I actually came to this organization I work for, which was then Holly Frontier Corporation, I had a mentor that was on the finance side that said, you know what, Kenny, it's great that you have that background in theater arts, but could you imagine being someone with your theater arts training, human resources background, but also a degree in business? Just think about how dangerous you'd be and how you would step up and stand out and be set apart from other HR professionals. Nevertheless, that is how I developed and got to where I am now.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a big fan of the Mean Green. Both my sons graduated from the University of North Texas. So when you said Mean Green, I'm like, hey, I've got my, for those who are listening, I got my Mean Green sign up here. I love that. And
Oh yeah.
it's interesting too, because a lot of people that I talk to, you would think that it's just that traditional, hey, they started a school, they went, 4 or 5 years, they got out of school, but many just leave, they move around. Me personally, I went to University of Central Oklahoma for a year. Decided I was going to get married, and I quit for 4 years, and I went to East Central for a couple of years, and I went back to my college and graduated. And so, just that journey, I think at the end of the day, it's all about, finishing the journey. That's really what it's all about. And so I
Right.
appreciate you sharing that. Hey, I do want to ask you this before we move forward here. I've heard theater a couple of times. Did you have a dream of, like, I don't know, being a actor or?
I did. So from junior high, actually way before then, my first play was in the 6th grade. I was in a show called Shaping Up Santa, and it was about helping Santa lose weight. So he pulled a sleigh, and I played the pizza delivery boy, Tony. And my mom, who also has a performance background, she prepped me for my audition. So she turned this Tony's pizza delivery guy into almost like a Fonz character. And back then it was easy to do for me because I had way more hair and I could slick it back and I looked like the Fonz. And I dreamed about that a long time. I still dabble in it a little bit, not as much as I used to. I did community theater. I've done some short films, but
Mm,
where the needle kind of moved for me when I got involved in HR, that became a career for me. And
mm,
there's points even now in my HR career where I feel like I still get to feed that machine a little bit. And then the other side of it is I had friends in college that completely talented. From time to time, I turn on TV, I see them. I
oh,
had a
wow.
friend that was just in the Bob Marley movie that just came out. But along their journey, when I call and talk to them and say, "Man, I wish I could be in Hollywood or New York with you," they tell me about the beans and rice diet they were on. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not good at that part of life. So I'm good every other week or every month paycheck. I'll run down to Theater Arlington if I need to feed this machine a little bit."
That's a great story. I love that. I actually was trying to bowl. My parents own bowling centers. And so I tried to bowl professionally for a little bit, and the beans and rice, man. My kids were like, "Man, we got to eat." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, maybe I better pivot here." This has been great. You mentioned you had a mentor that said, "Hey, you probably need to, learn some business here." I always like to talk about mentors on the show. I think it's important to, I don't know, just to kind of reflect on who's kind of helped us where we've gotten to. I'm curious if you've had a few mentors, and if you have, what was it about them that made them such a great mentor?
So when I think about my career, the thing that I think about the most and where I am, and even being able to talk to you this morning, Bruce, is all because of my mentors. I give
Mm,
myself credit, obviously, but my mentors were always good at guiding me, girding me, and also reining me in when I needed to be reined in. And my very best mentors, I think one specifically, even at the company I work for now, are the ones that were willing to tell you the truth at the risk of the
mm,
relationship. Even with the things that you think you don't want to hear. I love transparency. It's funny, whenever I have my one-on-ones with my leaders, I say, well, I, I love being able to get out of the seat and walk out and know exactly where I stand. Either I had a really good day or I really bombed this one, but either way, I'm going to know. And I've just been really blessed in that way to have mentors that were able to tell me the truth. So
yeah.
I don't have a false sense. Confidence is one thing. I think that's very, very important to believe in yourself. But
Yeah.
to have a false sense of your abilities is another thing. And a leader, a good leader and a good mentor is going to tell you that and guide you in the right direction. So you can continue to work on those things that, the outside world will probably deem as imperfections.
Mm. Sometimes the truth hurts, though, doesn't it?
It hurts, but sometimes pain can be pleasure too, right? So
Yeah, no kidding. I love that. You mentioned confidence and belief. I'm curious, have you always like believed in yourself or and the people are listening right now, they're like, man, I want to believe more. Talk about that.
I wouldn't say I always believed in myself. I'm someone that's been an underdog my entire life because I've had to move and I've been the new kid a lot of times early in my life. And at one point, we moved from one side of town to the other. So my stomping ground is Arlington, Texas.
Hmm.
And when we first moved to Arlington, I lived on the south side that was really underdeveloped compared to now, of course.
Hmm.
And it was my first group of friends living in Texas. So I had a close knit little group. My mom changed jobs and had to move on the other side of Arlington, which is the north side by the Cowboys Stadium.
Hmm.
And I was 13, 14 years old and cried like a baby when she was dropping me off to school. I was like, I have to start all over. And my mom looked at me and said, suck it up, buttercup. And you
Hmm.
have to believe in yourself. You're going to have more friends. Those friends you had there are not your life friends
Hmm.
because you have something very special about you that those friends then recognize. Now, whatever she was talking about to this day, I still don't know. I could probably imagine what she was talking. I could probably guess what she was talking about, but that day kind of changed my life in terms of, I walked in that school with my shoulders broad, my
Hmm.
head up, and I'll be darned if my favorite redhead, that's how I refer to my mom, wasn't right. Like those people are my lifelong friends.
Hmm.
Those teachers, there's a handful of them that I'm still in contact with. So I think it is important to believe in yourself. It's so hard to have what I call cheerleaders in your life, right? So you have to start waving your own pom pom sometimes, and I do that. But I believe in listening to those people that have been down your road or
Hmm.
where you're trying to go. So again, I've had people to be honest with me and rein me in a little bit when I go too far into that confidence zone.
Hmm. That's good stuff. I love that. Moms have such great advice. My mom, I remember even in sixth and seventh grade, her talking about, you got to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
And I figured it out later. Oh, is that what you were talking about? That's so good. Here you are though. I mean, think about it. Like your journey. You talked about your school journey. You talked about, when you were asked to do the new hire orientation. And today you get to like lead this significant group. I mean, here you are, focused on, inclusion, diversity, talent acquisition. Was there like this moment where you said, okay, you know what? I've been doing this. I've found my lane. I have found my calling, my purpose is what I was meant to do. Was there a moment? I know you mentioned at the Six Flags when they said, "Hey, we want you to do new hire orientation." But as you've gotten to now, as you look back, like has there been a moment?
I wouldn't say there's been a specific moment. What I would tell you is I know that I'm supposed to be in a space where people can be accepted and people can be inspired.
Mm.
And when I think about even those examples I shared with you about friends and that kind of thing and all my moves. So my father was in the US Air Force. So we've lived everywhere. I've lived in the Philippines, I lived in New Jersey,
Mm.
I was born in Denver, Colorado. My parents originally from Texas. So when my dad's military career was ending, we moved back to where they're from, which is Fort Worth, Texas. So all those different parts of the world and the country I just laid out for you, that requires a big shift in how you communicate, how you talk, how you walk. The culture is different. So in my life, I've always had to figure out how to adapt. And with that, it requires you to interact with different people, accept other people. I've always been a fan of the underdog. I'm
Mm.
a product of the 80s. Favorite movie is Rocky. Most of my favorite movies are like that with the
I like
underdog,
that.
Forrest Gump. So I definitely think it was funny growing up. I was always sad when I had to move And I was like, well, why do I have to change who I am? And the truth of the matter is I never had to. I fit right in the rest of the world,
Yeah.
but learning how to adapt and learning how to be flexible and
Mm,
accepting of others, there's no other place than I was meant to be than here,
mm,
where I'm in a space to remind people to be authentic, remind people to be kind, remind
mm.
people to be who they are, and leaders to understand that, yes, sometimes you do. I know you have a game plan. I know you have a playbook, but sometimes that playbook may need to be a little adjusted for the
Mm.
players on the field.
That's so good. I had a, guest on, Andrew Walker talked about that being, the underdog. I told him he has a boat, and I told him he need to name his boat the Underdog. I know you do some writing too. You need to name your book the Underdog. That is, man, I got chills right now. I've already got a full page of notes here. I know people are listening right now. They're like, "Oh man, can y'all slow down? I'm taking so many notes here." This is so good. I do want to jump into leadership here because I like to ask my guests the question when someone says, "Hey, Kenny, what's leadership to you?" How would you respond to that?
When I think of leadership, I think there are two primary things when you stand in the posture of a leader. One is your job is to make room for someone else,
Mm,
period. Doesn't
mm,
mean that when you step into leadership, you're already planning your exit or retirement. But the truth of the matter is, if you're a generous uh, leader and a purposeful leader, you should always build people up to make room for them to sit in your seat one day. That's my opinion. The other part of it is leaders are almost like a compass, right? And you should point your team in a direction that goes way further than you've ever gone before. That's what a leader is to me.
I love that. I worked for a company years ago, and the leader always said, "If you want to move up in the organization, you need to find your replacement." And I was like, "That's so good." Like when you said, "Make room for someone else." I love that. One of the things that I've noticed about you, and when I notice that, anytime I'm going to have a guest on the show, I love doing a little bit of research, and I'm like, oh man. So here's what I noticed about you, and I immediately thought, man, this guy is a leader, and it's because you and I see this on social media, so I don't get to work with you every day, but I get to see you from afar. You give a lot of shout outs, and I noticed that you mentioned your father in the military. You call him Pops. You,
Yeah.
you gave him a shout out recently. Thank you for like at the time you're like, oh man, I'm moving, but now you look back and you're like, thank you for what you did. And then you I think you gave a shout out to an author and a keynote speaker and colleagues. You're just constantly giving people, I don't know, it's encouragement. It's letting them know that hey, you made a difference for me, and I know you're making a difference for others. Where does that come from?
I think the biggest thing is it just comes from understanding that life is a story and you can control your story, but there's other people that are a part of your story that give you the content to write your story. I didn't get here by myself, and
Mm,
nor have I arrived either. But to continue to be fueled to be successful and have opportunities like today and other things to come, there were people around, whether they were supporting cast members or they were a bigger star than me. There's so many people. You mentioned my dad, and I'm very grateful, Pops, man. Like
mm,
19 years old to say, I'm about to go to the Vietnam War. I wouldn't be here if he hadn't made that decision at 19 years old. Also, I have a grandfather that I lost 2 years ago, but he was on this earth for 104 years. And some
mm,
of the sacrifices he made, I used to talk to him about the civil rights era, and he had no bitterness in his heart
mm,
about any of it. He grew up in the sticks of Arkansas,
mm.
and he was just always grateful. So I had people like Pops and my grandfather that have gone through way more things than me. Here I am complaining about moving from one side of Arlington to another. Imagine 19 years old and moving
Mm,
to a foreign country and waking up to ammunition flying all around the building
mm,
that you're trying to sleep in.
mm,
My grandfather, I talked to him a lot about, love and hate and even prejudice and racism as he came up and he said, you know what? When during World War II, The only thing we were cared about was survival. When you're in the foxhole with someone else, it's about survival. And that person across from you is your brother. And he said, I've never hugged someone as passionate as I hugged my brothers in World War II. So I've just, again, I've had people like that that have always taught me to be grateful. And you got to get back, right? You got to continue to get back as you move. You can't, my grandmother used to say, don't show up at someone's house with the empty belly with the expectation of getting full. So she taught me with that, you don't show up empty handed. You always give something. You can't get full on someone else's blessings without being a blessing yourself.
I think I saw you gave her a shout out too. I think it was International Women's Day. You call her Granny,
Oh yeah,
and
Grant.
that's good. Oh man, I got to tell you, I got chills. This man, this is so good. My grandfather, who I never got to meet, was in World War II, and he died in a they were loading ammunition on a ship, and 300, it blew up, and 300 guys were killed at Port Chicago. And today I carry the load, and so when I hear about someone talking about, serving our country, thinking about it, 19 years old going to Vietnam. I mean, I just can't even fathom. I have so much. And so as you talk about this, it's just like I'm just full of gratitude. And I can feel like you are the same way. Um, I do want to ask you this question around diversity and inclusion. What are some of the, I don't know, some, maybe a challenge you see today in the workplace that you have seen and continue to see in your space?
I would say a couple of things. What I've seen a lot of companies do in the past 5 years is diversity has become more of a buzzword and soundbite. It's a new toy to play with to make people feel good, which people feeling good is important, right?
Mm,
But I think one of the biggest challenges is to have action behind those words, pure action,
mm.
uh, pure strategy, and purpose behind diversity and inclusion.
And that's probably, I guess that's probably part of your role, right? Trying to put together a strategy and helping people like move into action, right?
Right.
Okay, that's good stuff. I think that I've heard that a little bit. But I'm seeing some companies doing some great things. And it's just, I think it's just day by day. I have in my book Life in the Leadership Lane, I have this brick wall behind me. For those that are listening, if you go onto YouTube, you can see. And in my book Life in the Leadership Lane, I talk about the brick wall of leadership, and it's about laying bricks every day. But you have to show up and you have to lay a brick every single day because it looks like nothing's really happening. You're just laying a brick. And then next thing you know, somebody says, man, where did that house get there? How did that happen? You know what? I've been in action every single day. And I think in any space, that's what it really takes. It takes action, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Like diversity and inclusion isn't something that you just flick a couple light switches and give a good speech and people get
Mm,
goosebumps and then it's over and you say, well, we're all diverse, we're all
mm,
inclusive. It's work. It's a
mm,
journey.
mm,
It's not a couple workshops, and
mm,
you just got to be committed to it, and you have to have the thick skin. And to your point, you have to think more about that daily brick and the cement you're pouring.
mm. Yeah.
Stop thinking about the wall so much and think about each brick.
I'm curious. You got the award at the HR Stars, which was phenomenal. What do you think was it that people saw that said, "Hey, we want to recognize"? Because I mean, you mentioned earlier, and I've thought about this too, even in my role. Sometimes it can be thankless. It can be like days are not like every day is not a great day. There are just you have these moments. I get every day is probably a great day, but you have these moments sometimes that aren't so great. What do you think it was that I don't know made the group say, you know what, this right here, we need to recognize this because they're making a difference.
I think if anything else, the consistency and the commitment,
Mm,
right? Like again, you can throw the word inclusion on some banners and throw your company logo on it, but without action,
mm,
it pulls no weight and it bears no fruit, right? But I was lucky from our executive leadership. My leader, Dale Kuhneman, and my peers, everyone rallied around this thing and said, yeah, we need to do this. So we added inclusion as our fifth value as a corporation, cultural value, back in 2021. And months after that is when I was appointed into this role and gained this responsibility. And the first thing I thought was, we have to start with leadership. We have to equip leadership with the right tools. This cannot be the fancy car on the lot that just shines bright, where people walk around and say, we're inclusive, right? We really needed to deploy the right people and educate key leaders that touch our front line. Because without leadership, the front line was going to be lost on, oh, okay, this is one of those new HR initiatives, right? And it was not an HR initiative, the initiative of the entire organization. So we spent a lot of time equipping leaders and getting leaders involved in inclusive leader workshops. We also created different opportunities to create employee engagement. And what was birthed out of that, which is really neat, and I'm not going to take complete credit for that, because it was really our employees come to me and teaching me some things about the space that I lead and occupy. Full transparency, I knew nothing about Jwali. And we had a handful of employees that year come to me, talk to me about it, and said, we need to recognize this. This is important. And what was so really cool about that, when they educated me, they said, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about separating good from evil, or evil from good. And that's it in a nutshell. And I said, well, what better custom or holiday to celebrate than one that aligns completely with our organization when it comes to having integrity, having teamwork. It just really meant a lot in the inclusive space that I occupy. So again, I've never thought, as a leader, you need to know everything. You just need to know how to lead, and the right people are going to come.
I love that. I talk a lot about values in all my books that I've written, and what I say about that is values make choices easier. So when you all of a sudden say we got inclusion of the value, now all of a sudden when we're making decisions, they're easier. They're not easy. They're easier to make, because we're like, hey, that's important to us. That aligns with whatever value, whether it's integrity or service or inclusion, whatever that value is, that's in line with that. Or no, that's not in line with that. I love what you said about consistency and commitment. Because that's a quality, like a lot of people struggle with consistency and commit. Like we all have a good idea. Hey, let's go. And then all of a sudden people just fall off. I always talk about the why. How have you been able to be, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I gave you a few questions ahead of time, but I didn't give you this question. I'm just curious, like how do you stay consistent? Because I know there's people out there listening right now going, okay, I want to be more consistent. How do I do that?
Well, what fuels me when I wake up in the morning is see people win anyway. So to be consistent in this space for me is easy, because it's part of who I am. But the true consistency is the other folks that don't stand in the space that I'm in. And I have to give our leaders in our organization credit. It was funny. I went out to, when you're in the oil and energy space, you most of the towns are rural and quite different. And
Sure.
you think, okay, I'm going to go in here and talk about diversity and inclusion. My favorite, I won't name the town or the specific site, but my favorite moment, I talked to one of the leaders afterwards, and he said, man, before I attended this session, I'd rather shovel sheep dung than attend this. And this is the best thing I've ever had. I should have gotten this early on in my leadership career. So it's things like that that kind of keep things afloat. And it's the naysayers, really. It's the folks that are cynical, because the staff thinks, okay, well, if Johnny here could change, I know I can. If Johnny here is buying this product, then I have to get in line and buy the product. So it's things like that. It's our leadership that's kept us consistent.
Yeah, I like what John Maxwell says. He says everything rises and falls on leadership. And that is so good. In my book, Life and Leadership Lane, I talk about developing influence in the workplace. And I always talk about there's really 5 steps. And, it's building trust, it's defining the right problem, it's building that business case. But the 4th step is a lot of people like struggle. And that is you have to be persistent. You have to even connect with the naysayers. because they can help you probably just as much or more than others, because they'll tell you, hey, from my view, this is really what it looks like. And it gives you a chance to kind of, oh, well, I see that. Well, let's go and tackle that. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think that there's enough to go around, and everybody is a part of the story. Like I was
Yeah.
saying earlier, you can't
Yeah.
write the story with just the people waving pom poms. You need
Mm,
those naysayers. There's always a villain and a hero, right?
yeah. Oh,
And
right.
sometimes that villain and hero ends up connecting and being really good friends. So you need a little bit of everybody to be successful and to be
Mm.
consistent.
Hey, I want to ask you one last question before we kind of shift here. I do want to ask about, talent acquisition, because there's people out there today that are, reaching out to me and saying, hey, I know some people. I'm trying to find a new role. I'm in transition. I don't know, maybe something you've seen, maybe give a tip or a couple of tips for people that are, I don't know, they're in transition. How can they stand out today? Because I mean, it can be pretty noisy out there, right? You got social media, you just got so many different things going on. What's something that someone in transition should be thinking about as they move on to a new role?
The first thing I would say is to know who you are.
Mm,
Your gift will make room for you, right? So find out what makes you unique. I'm in the engineering space, being in oil and energy, and when I talk to the interns every summer, I say, there's 70 of you in the room that are engineers, but there's something specific about the way you engineer that's going to make someone thirsty for it. You just got to
mm,
figure out what that secret sauce is. Your it, if you will, should cause such a thirst that when you leave the room, people miss you. So you first have to figure that out because you're going to apply for jobs. To your point, it's pretty noisy out there. You got social media, it's very competitive, but you have to figure out what makes you unique that's going to quench someone else's thirst.
man, this is so good. Kenny, we could do this all day long. This is fantastic. I just finished my book, Drive with Purpose, and I talk about moving your career from success to significance. And as I see some of the things you are doing, I just like, man, this is what significance is. This is when you're really like when you're trying to focus on your success, you're really focused on you and how you can do things. But when you focus on significance, it's all about others, and that's what you're doing. I love this. You've given some incredible advice today on the show. Like it's been so good. But I do like to ask this question: have you ever been given any advice? I don't know. Maybe it was from pops or granny or someone in the family or during your career. It's just so good. You just find yourself sharing that with others.
I had a leader probably 5 years ago, the organization I work for, that said, manage your brand. People are
Mm.
watching, manage your brand.
Okay, I have to go dig into that right there. How do you manage your brand? And I know there's some listeners going, that is so good. How can we manage our brands? Talk about that.
I think you have to watch how you move, number one, right? And be consistent with that. Like,
Mm,
what do you want to be known for? You
mm,
want to be known for the person that everyone thinks in the office is always bringing someone down with negative energy, or do you want to be that person when you leave the room, people notice that there's an empty seat over there?
mm,
So manage your brand, manage your energy. What do you want to be known for? And whatever that is, number one, own it.
mm.
Two, leverage that because that's what's going to make room for you is your brand.
This is so
And
good.
let's be honest, we know people that have all these great certifications, and I know people that have more degrees than a thermometer. But at the end of the day, if they're not known as someone that's a team player and that sweet brush of energy in the office,
Mm,
they don't go very far. It's
mm,
the brand that always moves you.
mm. And people want to be around that. People want to be around energy. They want to be around consistency and commitment and all the things that you talked about. Jim Link was on my show. He's the CHRO for Sherm. And he
Yeah,
talked about that same thing, just what you said. Who do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known for? And how important that is. And I love how you just frame that up. I know that there's some people listening right now. They're like, what am I known for? I got to figure that out. So I got to start talking to some different people and ask them that question. Hey, what do you know me for? and make sure all that's in alignment. This has been so good. Oh my goodness, Kenny. I love that. I
But
love all the things that you're doing. I want to shift over to it's time to accelerate for some fun facts. But here we are. We just finished the first quarter. We're in the second quarter. What are you looking forward to ahead in the year 2024 and beyond?
well, first, I'm looking forward to the LA Lakers finally winning another championship. But
I love
no,
it.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, I like I said earlier, I like to see people win. I want to see more of that. I want to
Mm,
see people, my peers win. I want to see my organization win. We are in the middle of a very strategic effort right now that I won't go into details, but it's going to require everyone doing some heavy lifting. And I'm looking
mm.
forward to witnessing that. I'm looking forward to being a contributor of that. So I just want to win.
That is fantastic. I love how you talked about you love seeing people. I'm the same way. Like when someone puts something out there, and I'm glad you said that because I want to mention this. A lot of people they don't want to like put out there something that they've done, right? Like I just recently was recipient of the President's Club, so I put my award out there. And a lot of people don't. They're like, I don't want to really brag on myself, but people want to cheer for you. They want to know the things you're doing so they can say, "Hey, you're winning," and that makes me feel good. You know?
Absolutely.
Hey, I did have a chapter in my book called "Great Leaders Are Grateful Leaders." What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for everyone that's given me an opportunity and cheers for my wins. I'm
Mm.
grateful for all the people that have helped me along the way that God's placed in my life. And I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for the sky being blue behind me. Uh, any situation can be worse than today. One of Pop's my favorite quote from Pops is, "Son,
Mm.
there's somebody out there that would love to have your problem." So I'm just grateful for this moment, Bruce.
And I'm grateful for you being here today. I tell people all the time, I have people on the show and nobody understands how much I'm growing from all this wisdom. That this is so good. Hey, okay. I heard basketball. I heard LA Lakers. What energizes you?
Winning,
Hmm.
winning, especially if it's the underdog winning.
And that goes beyond. I was telling my brother the other day, we were having a conversation about margins. And we were talking about how early on we were talking about margins in our finances. When you have margins, it gives you options. But later we started having the conversation about with relationships. And as you shared that winning, my mind immediately went to winning includes building great relationships, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so good. Okay. This is my final question, probably my favorite question. Kenny, 10 years older, is around the corner knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to say to you?
I think what I'd say to an older Kenny Braxton 10 years from now is thank you.
Mm,
Thank you for being your authentic self. Thank you for being the person that God created you to be instead of who they told you you should be.
that's a wise 10 years older Kenny Braxton. I love it. This has been so much fun. I knew it was going to be energizing. Hey, there's somebody listening today that said, I really liked what Kenny said about this, or I want to follow him or connect with him. Is there a way that people could connect with you?
I'm on all social media channels, but I would say LinkedIn would be the best way
Yep.
to connect.
Okay. So when you connect with Kenny, be sure and let him know on LinkedIn. I'll put the link in the show notes. Be sure and let him know you heard him on Life in the Leadership Lane. It makes that connection instant. And let him know, kind of maybe share a takeaway. But this has been so good. I am so grateful to have you on the show today. I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I know it's going to help a lot of people. And I can't wait to see all of the great things ahead for you, my friend.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been a pleasure.
Can't wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Have a great day.